so you've got your debits, you've got your credits. Now we are going to look at how to record these transactions. So we already discussed the analysis. Now we are going to record these in the journal. So step 2, as it says, recording journal entries, or you may also see it called journalizing a transaction. So it's just getting that transaction into the journal. 2 ways of saying the same thing. So every single business transaction that we have is going to be recorded as a journal entry. So this is one single transaction as a journal entry. And all of these journal entries are recorded in the general journal. And this is the summary of all of the entries in chronological or in date order. So I want you guys, or a way you could kind of remember this, is thinking about like a journal that a person could write in, like a diary, that type of journal. So every single time they go and they write in that journal, they're making an entry. So they would write today, September, whatever date, blah, blah, blah. Here's what happened in my day. Here's how I'm feeling, that type of thing. So each time they write in there, it's called an entry. And that book, the summary of all of the entries that they've written in there, day over day, is the journal itself. So each time they're in there, they have a journal entry. The whole book or the summary of all of the entries is called that journal or the general journal. So just a way you can differentiate those. And as I said, this is called journalizing or recording an entry. So we already discussed this a little bit, that accounting is based on the double entry system. There's always 2 sides to a transaction, so at least 2 accounts. Each transaction is recorded as a journal entry. We know journal entries, we're going to use our debits and our credits. And now here's the hugest, most important part about an entry, that they must balance. Like the video said, balance all of your transactions. And this means that our debits must equal our credits. So this is a big star for you guys, something you can't forget when you're doing a journal entry. Debits must equal our credits. This is an example of what a journal entry looks like. There are 4 parts to each entry. First, you've got the date. So we need to know when these transactions are happening. So every time that we do one, we will put a date. Next, you will have the debit part. So you will have the title of the account and the dollar amount. So you can see that here, cash and the amount. And we know debits on the left, credits on the right. So you can see that the debit here for cash is further to the left. And this, the third part here, our credit, so that's this second line, Lisa Hunter Capital. We've got the account name and the dollar amount, and it is indented to the right. And it's just differentiating that. Debits on the left, credits on the right, and you do that with your account names as well. And then the fourth thing that you'll see is just a short explanation of the transaction. So here I've drawn on it a bit, but it says we received the initial investment from the owner. For purposes of our course, this the explanation will really just be restating the question. So we've got to tell you, or the textbook needs to tell you what the transaction is, so you're able to just kind of restate that as an explanation. In real life, you have that explanation because you may look back at a journal entry recording a transaction months or years in the future. So when you look back on that a year later, you're not necessarily going to remember why you did that or what was going on in the transaction. Especially for our purposes, they'll be fairly self-explanatory, but you'll see when you get through more complex accounting that it's not entirely self-explanatory. So you need to have these explanations So when you do look back, you can remember what happened or why you were recording this entry. Okay, so next we will look at or continue on with our examples that we were looking at. So in step 1 and part of step 2, we figured out, or we analyzed, we knew the accounts, that they increased or decreased, and we figured out whether those made a debit or a credit. So step 2 is actually recording the journal entry. And we said here we need these 4 items. So the first thing you need is the date. So we'll go through September 1st, 2020. So a cash purchase of inventory costing $4,500 on September 1st, 2020. So first we have our date. The next thing we needed was our debit. And we see up here that we're going to be debiting inventory. So we'll put this DR, by the way, I should have mentioned that back when we looked at the slide with all of the accounts. DR equals debit and CR is credit. So rather than writing debit and credit every journal entry, it is okay to put DR and CR. So we will debit our inventory account, and we need the dollar value. So it cost $4,500. The third thing that we have is our credit, which we see here is the cash account. So since it needs to be a bit to the right, we indented a bit there. And we have our credit to cash. It's also indented over here. So we have the $4,500 again. And then lastly, we need a quick explanation. So as I said, we can just restate the question, or you could change it a bit, but that's the idea. So we would say to record the purchase of inventory with cash. Doesn't need to be too complicated or too complex, just stating what happened, a quick explanation. We purchased inventory and we used cash. So that's the first example of a journal entry. There's the first item, our date, our debit information, our credit information, and that explanation. Okay, so we can look at our next example, which was a purchase of a truck through the bank loan, and that truck cost $30,000, and it happened on September 10th. So again, we've analyzed, truck is increasing is a debit, bank loan is increasing is a credit. So now we will use that in our journal entry. So what is the first thing we need? Right, we need to tell the date. So this happened September 10th, 2020. Next, we need our debit. So now I want to show you actually a different way that you could do this. So on the previous slide, I put debit and credit right before the words, which is typically what I do, but it's also okay to just label a column over here. So we wouldn't put the debit or credit, or you could do both. So we've got our truck, we're increasing it, debiting it for $30,000. And then we have our credit, which was our bank loan payable. So we still indent that. And we took on the bank loan for $30,000 as well. And now it goes under the credit column. So still to the left and right, it's just a different way. So if you prefer labeling your columns, that's fine. If you prefer labeling in front of the account here, that's okay. But you do need to specify somewhere that it's a debit or a credit, just to make it clear so I know that you understand that. And lastly, here we would need a quick explanation. So to record purchase of a truck and new bank loan, or with a new bank loan. So as long as whatever you say in your explanation is actually what is happening, the wording doesn't have to be exactly what I would say. It's never going to be the same exactly, but just something that does explain a quick restatement of the question. Okay, so that is step 2. We've done all of this work already in our analysis as we were going through it, but typically when you get to a question in the textbook, you'll just see this: a purchase of a truck through a bank loan costing this amount on the date. You're just thinking these steps, and it will ask you to record the entry, and all you're going to write down is what you see here for step 2. So we broke it up just because we're learning all of these different steps and how to get to debits and credits. But once you get to the actual questions, you'll just see this question, and all you'll need to write is the journal entry. All right, we will look at step 3 in our next video.